Hey, this is gonna be a special video. I'm a little bit worried because today is the first day when I'm taking you to my job. Today I'm co-organizing Founders Breakfast at the London AI Hub, and we will have an incredible speaker. So I thought, why don't I bring y'all together with me and show you how it all looks like? And what is even more important, I will give you the whole footage of her talk so you can see how the raw founders' insights look like, right? So meet Amy Thomson, founder and CEO of Moody Month, one of those most incredible health tech startups. I'm a big fan of health tech, but I've never ever seen a startup like this. So Moody Month is essentially a 21st century guide for female hormonal changes. It not only tracks your period, it as well guides you through your hormonal change and helps you to understand your mental health. Turned out to be they're the only one startup that exists in this category. And they have more than 100,000 users worldwide. But without further ado, today we will hear Amy sharing her insights with other founders, answering all of those questions. So be prepared, that's going to be a raw footage. Be prepared, you will hear a lot. All right, without further ado, let's just get into it, right? I'm so excited. I want you to see it. Let's go.
Back in 2012, I had built a digital communications business, pre-Instagram, so shows my age. And ultimately, that was looking at quantification for brands before digital media was what it is today. Back then, one of our biggest clients was Nike. So the business was very successful. We were hitting over 10 million in revenue in the first 3 years. But one of the things that was interesting about that early stage of health technology, wearables, and if any of you in this room ever saw a fuel band, you would understand how early that was, is that it was really looking at this idea of homogenizing male and female as the same. Because you were looking, and still today, looking at a 24-hour reset every single time. Now, I was young and ambitious, and we were scaling this business. And I realized that although this agency business was making great money and it was doing really well, there was $1 billion white space that I was much more passionate about pursuing, which was looking at female mental health. And the reason being that one of the key motivators behind health technology today and back then was mental health. And yet again, we were homogenizing male and female as the same. And so the user experience from these products, whether it be a run club or whether it be a mental health app, even at that point, something like Headspace, was still focusing on this idea of resetting yourself every 24 hours. So that's where the $1 billion white space was very clear to me, but obviously it's a very different thing between seeing a white space and then selling your company and deciding to pursue it. That was, at that point in time, back in 2017, something that people thought was completely mad. But often the most interesting ideas come out of someone perceiving you to be crazy. So we decided to focus in on this market of female mental health and building technology in that space. This is a pre-AI era, obviously. So the chronology of 2016, 2017 was that app technologies were still not adopted. Subscription models even weren't proven out yet. So that's where the kind of starting point of Moody came from. The inception of Moody happened in London, but the growth of Moody has been very much from the US and from the scale of the US. The journey has been one of resilience, perseverance, and obviously at that point, yes, there was lots of capital available, but funding was obviously very complicated as well. We're an all-female engineering team, which was not designed for a pitch document. It was designed so that women could, through their lived experience, code something faster than someone who hadn't lived that experience. In the same way as when you see the world through this lens of a 24-hour cycle, you're not seeing it through a lived experience as a female. And as a female developer, it's much faster and much more cost efficient to work with them. So between 2016 or 2017, I should say, I did take a little time off, and 2020, we began to build the infrastructure and the foundation points for what we knew to be the foundation of a data infrastructure. The important thing about Moody was how we built not just the technology to predict and understand when hormones were going to impact on your mental health, because hormone data was the foundation point for what differentiates between male and female mental health. So coming back to building, we realized that data infrastructure, how we were going to build the data safely and securely, but also, again, building with a very lean team and a very low cost infrastructure. So that brings us to 2020, 2021. Aside from a global pandemic, we were launching our first kind of AI machine learning kind of models, machine learning at the time. And what we were able to see very quickly was there is a huge market for female mental health. There is a huge market for women, but there's also a really important way to do things slowly, safely, securely. And actually, at the time, I was living in the States and I moved back to the UK specifically because the UK gave a really interesting environment of creative communities that were thinking about things from both an academic perspective and not just about accumulation at any cost, at any pace. Now, the funding market was harder, but there was a reality that and with most technologies, you can scale into multiple markets. So the origin story of Moody is one of seeing the white space, being in an opportunity where still today, we are the only technology that focuses solely on female mental health. That to me is wild, but obviously this is also about a story of being in the right place at the right time with the technology that's ready to deploy. So obviously it takes a long time to build those models and build that infrastructure. So one of the other things I was going to touch on with this was funding. So we have never raised VC money, which is very unique for technology. We've raised £4 million, and over the period of time, that's been through angel investors, that's been through grant funding, that's been through tax benefits. I should say probably closer to 5 million with tax benefits as well. The meaning of that is there are other ways, alternative ways to raise money. I'm interested in this room, how many people have raised capital to date? How many people have raised VC capital? Okay. And how many people that have raised capital have raised it from angel investors? Yeah. So all of our money came from angel investors. And I do think that one of the things that's interesting about that is network is obviously your value. Everything is about being in the right places and having conversations and building that network. But also it's a new era of more diversity within technology coming from these angel invested businesses and being able to get to that scale. And if nothing else, if you take anything away from this, there is a new era of the way these businesses are funded and the success metrics of being able to get to scale through things like angel investment networks or angel investing. And we're testament to that. We've hit over 100,000 in revenue per month, and we're scaling out now into much broader markets across B2B and B2C. The real challenging factor, and again, I'm sure we'll have this discussion in Q&A as well, is how to stay motivated within funding cycles that can feel very piecemeal. And I think one of the things that we often forget is there's a human-centric approach to building businesses, particularly when I'm supposed to be building a business about mental health. And one of the biggest challenges in funding is your mental health. Not because of going out and presenting your business. Like, if you can't do that on repeat, then that should be a problem and you should address that. But actually just about the rejection, the inability to deal with the fact that you're continually putting yourself into environments where you're being rejected over and over again. And aside from the fact, from a logic perspective, when it comes to your own business, that eats away at your own motivation around what you're building and your own credibility and mental state, it's also a personal rejection, because no one goes into these kinds of businesses from the perspective of, I'm just doing it for the money. There's always a personal story of some kind, whether that be a career pivot, whether that be a passion for your topic, whether that be just seeing the white space and realizing that you are wanting to drive towards it. But it's not really just about the money. So managing rejection, I think, is one of the key factors that I think everyone should be trained to do when they're going through multiple funding rounds, which to us, we always imagine that by 2 million in funding, we would be raising VC money. We're at nearly 5 million in investment into the business through both angel and grant funding. And we've never raised a VC ticket. And that really has come down to, in the last couple of years, about managing this understanding of how to deal with rejection and the emotional implications of that over time. But we can kind of talk a little more about that in the Q&A maybe. The final piece of this introduction story that I thought was relevant was also to do with an era of building into AI and within a health tech space and what's safe and what's not. Obviously, I have the privilege of standing here, being part of the kind of Google ecosystem. And that came about because when we started the business with all the vision and all the mission that we had, we also realized we needed to build a scalable cost base. And when we were exploring early stages of how to build the infrastructure of Moody, we needed the cost base to stay the same as if we have 100 users, as if we have 1 million users. Otherwise, the business isn't scalable. And what we also realized was, yes, security, safety, the need for those kind of infrastructure pieces to stay consistent. And the reason we chose GCP actually was because we knew funding was going to be challenging and we were able to access things like the credits. But also we knew that as a cost base, we could control the cost base over time. And it was a kind of accidental realization, and I've been talking about it a lot recently, where particularly for female founders in the space or anyone building in an environment, thinking about your controllable costs so that if at any point you don't have the level of liquidity that you need or you want to be able to scale the business, you can protect the asset. The key is protecting the asset and being able to build something that, yes, scales, but also can operate on a very lean cost base if it needs to. Because the reality is, cash is not always going to continue to flow into the business, particularly if you're on the trajectory of a 10-year window. That window is very long when you're in it. So GCP was really critical to our growth strategy, but also we don't have AI front-facing because the cost of running AI models front-facing is way too much for the business, but also it's not safe. Our business and our technology predicts changes in mental health for women based on hormone data. And if that is wrong, then we are accountable and culpable to that inaccuracy. So the way that we've built our technology is that we synthesize large banks of research. And the one thing about female mental health and hormones is huge amounts of research because it's been used to exclude women, because it's been proven that actually that creates inaccuracies or inconsistencies in training data for things like pharma trials. But actually the research is there because the contraceptive, HRT, huge amounts of kind of banks of research around hormonal health and the impacts on women. Synthesizing that using AI into single insights to map the day, the week, the year of a woman's life across multiple different cross-sections of who a woman is, and then being able to use a machine learning model to select, well, based on who you are today at this moment in time, what insights from that research are relevant for you. But that research and that synthesis has all gone through academic review, it's gone through doctors before it ever sees a woman. That's important because it means, yes, we're AI powered, but the integration of AI from the perspective of safe, secure, zero chance of hallucination, but also so that it can be at scale. So we don't, and maybe this wasn't 100% clear, we don't have any AI front-facing on the consumer side of the product because of not being able to mitigate this. So we synthesize the research and then it goes through 2 academic reviews, one through our kind of in-house team, which is more of a kind of research team to ensure that the accuracy of what that insight is. So I'm going to give you an example. If you were to map a female menstrual cycle, you would look at a series of different variables around how you're looking at that. Regularity, irregularity, age, location, race, like what are the different variables that come into play in terms of what someone might be experiencing. And then you look at all the research, and on day 25 of a 28-day cycle, you'll have a series of insights that would be relevant for all those different consumer profiles. That day 25 is of all the days in a woman's life experience, which we've mapped. That's what someone will receive because of a machine learning model that selects, knowing that you are the kind of profile on day 25 of a 28-day cycle. So this insight is going to be relevant for you. But that's generated, but it's human in the loop reviewed. And the human in the loop review is both research, academic, and then into doctors. So they can say, yes, this is safe for someone to see and it's correct and it's accurate. So to remove the front face is to create, yes, a layer of evaluation. But to give example, when we were building the first stage of Moody pre-AI, it took 2 years to map the menstrual cycle alone. We now do every key hormonal life stages up to kind of menopause. Post-menopause is more complex, but that's a different topic. The experience of 2 years of synthesizing that research to get to that point can now be done in a day. Like just the research alone to take out all the insights and map it against that experience. So for us to launch pregnancy, postpartum pregnancy loss took us, yes, 6 months to be able to synthesize, to review, to then test. But the pace at which we could deploy was 100 times faster. So that's how we do it. And I do think in health technologies or any technology where AI is going to be a critical part of the evaluation process of mind, body in any way, zero hallucination can be can be seen there because you're culpable to the impact of that.
Yeah.
Not spend the first funding round I had as fast. So it's very exciting when you raising money, right? You need to raise money for a business like this, no question. How you deploy that capital in your first 2 years could determine your success or your failure, because ultimately the idea of structuring something where you're like, well, we're going to do this and then we're just going to raise another round. Look, like you might be the person that then does that and raises the other round, but you also need to protect the downside risk of not doing that. We made hires of team around things that were just not necessary. We had an office, we didn't need it. I think that was the era of where everyone was raising VC money apart from us, and was like spending money like water. Now the infrastructure is slightly different, but I think thinking with this mindset of what are the baselines that I need to do to acquire a customer or someone that's going to validate the commercial model of this business. Whether a VC is going to tell you that or not, I don't know. But like for me, in terms of feeling like I was building into a space of a business, not just an idea, was having the validation of customers and having the validation of someone that was willing to pay for the product that we had. And I wish I'd given myself more runway to get to that point. It's a combination of a few things in there, but I would say cost efficiencies in the first phase of business in terms of how you're deploying capital to get to a customer or customer validation. Building a product that works, obviously, like that's a given, but also the way you hire and how you hire and what are the fixed costs that you have within the business, which are not necessary. And we made the business remote in 2019. I wish we'd done it a year earlier because we would have saved ourselves a huge amount of money. And the flexibility that you have in those early stages of building great tech talent, which ultimately all want to be remote anyway, is the best thing we did. Is that helpful? The honest truth is I didn't choose the path. I went after all these different types of funding, but I did focus on the things that converted rather than focusing on the things that didn't. And very early doors, and still today, people homogenize Moody in the category, even though we called it Moody and people still didn't get, it's not fertility and contraception. People think about hormones and women and they think of fertility, contraception, and now thankfully menopause. But they don't think about mental health, even though that's what ties all those things together. VCs think in silos and think in trends, and rightly so, because that's their business model. But when you're thinking about something that's very future forward and also in an industry which is untapped and funding is still today, the data getting better in some areas, but not in VC. It's not getting any better. The reason it's getting better is people are diversifying the way they're thinking about acquiring capital rather than chasing VC, burning out, and then just giving up. So I think that the first thing is, if VCs are going to give you money and they're on favorable terms and they're good people to have in your business, excellent. But I've seen many examples of female founders in an era where we were first fundraising, where it was very trendy to be investing in certain, particularly people who have public profile, so celebrity or kind of some public profile, where the VCs have been the hardest part because their business is going to take an extra 3 years to convert. And that doesn't fit with the model of whatever fund that they've taken on. And the fund starts to almost actively push them down directions which are not the right direction for the business. So evaluating the type of money that comes into your business is really hard to do when you just want the money. So I'm lucky, weirdly, that whatever power out there has put me on this path and I can talk very clearly about it. What I wish I'd done earlier was cut off conversations with VCs and just focus only on angel investment, because angel investment was what was working. And when I did that after the third year, so I spent 3 years chasing VC money because everyone told me that's what I should do. And it never converted. Today, still no conversion. angel investors, especially when you start to get into the networks, provide so much value to your business as well. Like the type of board that I have in place and the type of infrastructure that I have for just calling on someone because I need someone that's in, I don't know, the wearable tech space that's already looked at data integrations and how do I access that? I have nearly 60 investors, and the way that we've also structured that is around terms that ensure that we are still in control. So where people come unstuck with angel investment can be a lot of people with a lot of opinions and a lot of controlling power. Standard terms, ordinary shares, the structure, keep it simple and consistent so that everybody and you still retain the control of the company. But I do think talking about the fact that as diversifying the success of these businesses is about having more diverse opportunities in funding, and angel investment is only becoming more interesting as the markets are becoming more volatile, so people are looking for investment into these spaces. But network is your net worth. Like, it is hard because you have to be everywhere all the time and it's very exposing. So there are some pros and cons, but focusing on the single track of what works, I think, is the key to making sure you can stay the course. I just wish I'd known that earlier.